Hello, and welcome to the 17th class on David. Let's start with a quick review. Last time we looked at the story of David and Bathsheba. This story reminds us that we need to understand that our reality is shaped by God and that sin is trying to avoid the truth that God has created us, loves us, and saves us. The best news is that God's mercy is greater than our sin, and we're invited out of sin into a relationship of love. Today, we'll look at the story of David's most gut-wrenching pain, the story of the death of his son. David isn't a stranger to disappointment, betrayal, or death, but the story of his son Absalom combines all of these emotions into one horrible event. How will David respond to suffering? This isn't merely an academic question. Christians aren't exempt from suffering either. Christians get diabetes, cancer, dementia in the same percentages as non-Christians. We are in car accidents, experience divorce, are disappointed by others. It still hurts when we stub our toes. Being Christian doesn't mean we're guaranteed to be healthy, wealthy, and wise. The Bible is honest. Jesus said that in this world we will have trouble, and he could speak from experience because he suffered himself. Suffering isn't an open and shut case of cause and effect. It's not divine punishment for our sins. Suffering is caused by our broken world, by our poor decisions, like when we run a red light and get into a car accident. It's also caused by the poor decisions of others that affect us, like someone else running a red light and hitting us as we drive through the intersection. Suffering always has a backstory, and in David's case, that story began 11 years earlier. We read in 2 Samuel chapter 13. In the course of time, Amnon, son of David, fell in love with Tamar, the beautiful sister of Absalom, son of David. Amnon was Tamar and Absalom's half-brother. Instead of going to David to ask for Tamar's hand in marriage, which would have been allowed, Amnon plots and then rapes Tamar. Rather than marrying her as the law required, he sent her away. When David learned of the rape, he did nothing. It was more important to protect his firstborn son than to protect his daughter. But not so Absalom, Tamar's brother. And Absalom never said a word to Amnon, either good or bad. He hated Amnon because he had disgraced his sister Tamar. 2 years later, Absalom takes revenge on Amnon. Absalom invites Amnon to a party. Absalom ordered his men, "Listen, when Amnon is in high spirits from drinking wine, and I say to you, strike Amnon down, then kill him. Don't be afraid. Haven't I given you this order? Be strong and brave." So Absalom's men did to Amnon what Absalom had ordered. The rape of Tamar leads to the murder of Amnon, and we hear echoes of David and Bathsheba and Uriah reaching to the next generation. Now, Absalom has to flee. Absalom fled, but King David mourned many days for his son. After Absalom fled and went to Geshur, he stayed there 3 years, and King David longed to go to Absalom, for he was consoled concerning Amnon's death. Even though Absalom was David's favorite son, Absalom was exiled. Murder is murder, favorite son or not. After 3 years, Absalom is finally allowed to come back home. Then Joab went to Geshur and brought Absalom back to Jerusalem. But the king said, "He must go to his own house. He must not see my face." So Absalom went to his own house and did not see the face of the king. Absalom lived 2 years in Jerusalem without seeing the king's face. David's pardon was only partial. He held on to his bitterness and refused to see or acknowledge his son Absalom. Absalom felt rejected by his father. He really only wanted his father's love. Absalom got rid of Amnon by murder. David attempted to get rid of Absalom by ostracizing him from the family. Notice how the consequences of one sin is rippling outward. The rape of Tamar led to Amnon's murder, led to Absalom's exile, led to David's rejection. This became David's third great sin. His rape of Bathsheba happened in the passion of the moment. His murder of Uriah was a royal cover-up. His rejection of Absalom was a deliberate refusal to share with his son what God had shared with him. David denied Absalom his love. Absalom's response to his damaged relationship with David isn't unusual or surprising. Absalom said to Joab, "Look, I sent word to you and said, 'Come here so I can send you to the king to ask, why have I come from Geshur? It would be better for me if I were still there.'" Absalom appears to have given up hope for a repaired relationship with his father, and just like he did with his brother Amnon, plotted his revenge carefully. He starts by acting like a king. In the course of time, Absalom provided himself with a chariot and horses and with 50 men to run ahead of him. Then Absalom would say to him, "Look, your claims are valid and proper, but there is no representative of the king to hear you." And Absalom would add, "If only I were appointed judge in the land, then everyone who has a complaint or case could come to me, and I would see that they receive justice." Only the king could command this type of visibility in public life, and it was the king who was supposed to provide justice for the people. Absalom spent 4 years ingratiating himself with the people, conducting a shadow campaign against David that led to Absalom finally declaring himself king at Hebron, David's first capital. A messenger came and told David, "The hearts of the people of Israel are with Absalom." Then David said to all his officials who were with him in Jerusalem, "Come, we must flee, or none of us will escape from Absalom. We must leave immediately, or he will move quickly to overtake us and bring ruin on us and put the city to the sword." When David hears Absalom has claimed the throne, he flees back to the wilderness. Hardship has always seemed to bring out the best in David. And if we let it, suffering can bring out the best in us too. David let his resentment of Absalom create a distance between them that might have spilled into a distance between David and God. Suffering forced David to reassess his life, like it can force us to stop and reassess our lives as well. As David escapes to the wilderness, he's forced to take stock of his life. Now David had been told, Ahithophel is among the conspirators with Absalom. Ahithophel was a wise man, a reliable advisor to David, and also Bathsheba's grandfather. He took the side of Absalom. Scholars speculate whether Ahithophel's anger at the treatment of his granddaughter Bathsheba may have influenced his choice of who to back during the coup. But when Ahithophel threw his lot in with Absalom, David felt betrayed. Now, suffering can either cause us to abandon God or it can deepen our life of prayer. In David's case, he turned to God in prayer. Psalm 3 is associated with this incident in David's life. "Lord, how many are my foes? How many rise up against me? Many are saying of me, 'God will not deliver him.' But you, Lord, are a shield around me, my glory, the one who lifts my head high. I call out to the Lord, and he answers me from his holy mountain." David's suffering caused him to turn and seek God. Now, while David is on the run, he's confronted by the man Shimei. As King David approached Bahurim, a man from the same clan as Saul's family came out from there. His name was Shimei, son of Gera, and he cursed as he came out. He pelted David and all the king's officials with stones. As he cursed, Shimei said, get out, you murderer, you scoundrel. The Lord has repaid you for all the blood you shed in the household of Saul, in whose place you have reigned. The Lord has given the kingdom into the hands of your son Absalom. You have come to ruin because you are a murderer." David is hearing the truth about himself shouted to the hilltops. He's no better than anyone else. Now, not everyone is happy about what Shimei is doing. Then Abishai said to the king, "Why should this dead dog curse my lord the king? Let me go over and cut off his head." But the king said, "What does this have to do with you? If he is cursing because the Lord said to him, 'Curse David,' who can ask, 'Why do you do this?'" David then said to Abishai and all his officials, "My son, my only flesh and blood, is trying to kill me. How much more then this Benjamite? Leave him alone. Let him curse, for the Lord has told him to." David has regained a sense of humility. Suffering peels away the mask that we all wear and the little lies we tell ourselves about who we are. Suffering reminds us of our need for God's love and his mercy. David finally faces Absalom and the rebels in battle, but before the troops march out, he gives one last order. The king commanded Joab, Abishai, and Ittai, "Be gentle with the young man Absalom for my sake." And all the troops heard the king giving orders concerning Absalom to each of the commanders. I'm a little surprised by David's words. I would have expected David to want to defeat his rebellious son and to end the coup that Absalom was leading to kill David and gain the throne. But suffering led David to rediscover compassion for the son he'd so recently rejected. David chose to love Absalom despite all their history, all the things that had gone wrong in their relationship. But David's general, Joab, did not have the same compassion. Now Absalom happened to meet David's men. He was riding his mule, and as the mule went out under the thick branches of a large oak, Absalom's hair got caught in the tree. He was left hanging in midair while the mule he was riding kept on going. Joab said, "I'm not going to wait like this for you." So he took 3 javelins in his hand and plunged them into Absalom's heart, while Absalom was still alive in the oak tree. And 10 of Joab's armor bearers surrounded Absalom, struck him, and killed him. Joab probably thought that David's command was sentimental, soft, not the order a mighty warrior would issue. So he took matters into his own hands yet again and killed Absalom. When David heard the news, he wept. The king was shaken. He went up to the room over the gateway and wept. As he went, he said, "Oh, my son Absalom, my son Absalom, if only I had died instead of you. Oh, Absalom, my son, my son." David's suffering moved him from the stubborn rejection of his own son to crying out some of the most heartbreaking words in the whole Bible. Absalom isn't the instigator of an attempted coup. He isn't David's enemy. Absalom is simply my son. David is the anguished father who would have died so that his son could live. Loving Absalom that day was one of the most human things David ever did. David loved, and because he loved, he suffered. David didn't avoid suffering when it came to him, but drank that bitter cup to its very dregs. Now, some important takeaways today. Suffering is a part of our lives. Suffering forces us to reassess what's really important in life, and suffering can lead us to a deeper love and compassion. Now, I'd encourage you to check out the discussion guide, which also includes study suggestions and other activities. Thanks for joining us. Next time, we'll find out how David faces his death. Until then, keep the faith.